Hello, good morning, and a very, very, very warm welcome to the first day of the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival 2022. My name's Hisham Wine. I'm going to be your MC for the next 2 days right here on the tech stage. Now, a lot of you, I'm sure, know a whole lot about the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival. I know that you're aware that this is the 6th time that this incredible, wonderful, seminal platform brings together opinion leaders, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, creators, and change makers from around the world. It's a spectacular place to be. This entire place is buzzing. It is absolutely wonderful. Our remit here on the tech stage is a little focused. In particular, over today and then tomorrow morning, we'll be looking at exploring innovations in technology. And specifically, we're going to be taking innovation and tech out of a silo and examining how it's redefining how we interact, how we work, how we play, how we consume information, how we take advantage of new opportunities and run our businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the hot button topics that we all get asked a lot about, at least I get asked a lot about, is Web 3. Because people keep asking, was there ever a Web 2? What happened to it? What is Web 3? What does it mean? Is it just a number? What technologies does it enable? Okay, Web 3 is decentralized. What does that mean? Wasn't the old web decentralized? How much of this is hype and fiction, and how much of this is actually being built on the ground? So what we decided to do was, rather than me talk at you for 2 days and completely bore you, we decided that we'd set up an incredible panel of experts that will take you through this journey of what Web3 is, what it means for all of us, and where we're going with it. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to welcome up some panelists. But first, I love the fact that you're all gathered here, and you are going to make this tech stage and the festival pop. So why don't we start by you giving yourselves a round of applause? Put it together, people. I love this guy because he actually put his phone into his pocket to free up his hand. Sir, thank you. That is dedication and commitment. Okay, so now I want the same love and appreciation from you as I call up my panelists. So first off, in no particular order, he's a New York-based entrepreneur who's worked in tech, in blockchain, in biotech, esports, gaming, and entertainment. Join me in welcoming the fundraising and partnerships lead from Gitcoin, Mr. Azim Khan. Coming up, sir. Where would you like him to sit? Shall we put him here? At the far end, sir. Up next, he is an award-winning bilingual business and media executive. He's also the director and co-founder of Metcalf.com. I've known him and his adventures for over 10 years. Put it together to Mr. Jamil Abu-Wardi. Up next, we've got an international keynote speaker, award-winning startup entrepreneur, and CEO and director of FTFT Capital. And if that wasn't enough, he is also the global ambassador for the Global Business Blockchain Council. Please welcome up Ola Lind. No, we can do better on the applause, people. We can do better on the applause. You're awesome, all of you. Well done. Now, we've got our panelists, but there's one seat that's empty, and that is for somebody to lead and shape this conversation and actually create this narrative. Luckily for all of us, we have found exactly the right person for this. She is the COO at VenturePunk, which is a Web3 venture studio. Previously, she was the co-founder and COO of The Tempest. She just happens to be a TEDx speaker and has been part of the Forbes 30 under 30 list. So a really long line of accomplishments. To your warm love, appreciation, and applause, join me in welcoming Mishal Wakar. Mishal, over to you.
Thank you so much. That was such a lovely Lovely, welcome. Welcome everybody. We are so excited to have this conversation today. We have some incredible folks with us today. So let's start off, each of you, tell us a little bit more about the work you've done and tell us a little bit more about you. Azim, if you want to start.
I'm the partnerships and fundraising lead at a company named Gitcoin. We give out money to open source software developers. We do it through a democratic method of capital allocation called quadratic funding. To date, we have given out over $72 million, and some of the biggest companies in all of crypto were at some point grantees, many billion-dollar companies, and I'm fortunate enough because of that to get to deal with all the companies who are helping fund us do this, and then the smartest builders in all of Web3 as well.
Thanks. Welcome to the panel, Azim. Ola?
Yep. I represent FTFT Capital. We are a Nasdaq-listed company with subsidiary here in Dubai. We work with universities, government, and both on topics of regulatory things and also development, where we develop our own with some partners. And one of the projects we're working on, we're going to actually launch in January here in Dubai, that we call Vverse, with our partners. And it's an interesting take on the Web3 and the metaverse in a different direction, not with crypto and blockchain per se.
Amazing. Jamil?
Thank you, Michelle. I'll start by asking everybody here, is there anybody who doesn't like money? That guy over there. Okay, so the first thing I'll say is the reason I got into crypto is money. But from a technical perspective, so I'm a media and technology guy, and I started to use e-commerce. And one thing that I got very interested in very early is the fact that you can send money from one person to another, and there isn't somebody in the middle taking 3 or 5%. And that's from a business perspective. If you can send money to somebody else, and there's most of the money, if not all of the money, gets across, was why I started. And that was 5 years ago. And I've spent the past 7 years explaining crypto, and that's where Metcalf.com, what I do, I explain what the use case is. So it did start with money, but the underlying technology, and this is what's happening, is a bit like the internet. It's like thinking that the internet is email, and everybody knows that the internet is a bit more than email today, so it's everything around us. And I know, and Web3 especially, has a lot to do with everything that we do on a personal level, and we're going to, I think, be talking about that today. So I explain the fact that it's not just money. I explain both on video, on stage, but I work with crypto companies, and I explain the technology in simple terms, as in how it's going to be useful to you.
Amazing. So I want to ask each of you that are seated here and giving us our attention today, how many of you know Web3 and what it is? Raise your hand. How many of you don't understand and want to learn what Web3 is? Raise your hand. Okay. And how many of you are familiar with crypto and understand what that means? Amazing. So this is a perfect opportunity. A bit about my background and how I fit into this conversation. So I run a Web3 venture studio called VenturePunk. I'm part of a couple of DAOs. And it's interesting that we're having this conversation today because a couple years ago when blockchain was the new buzzword, right? Everyone was building a blockchain company. I remember I would hear pitches because I was like, I have a security and tech background, but I don't understand how this fits into the real world, right? And so it wasn't until end of last year, when you actually introduced me and was like, hey, you need to pay attention to this thing that's going on. And it took me a little bit of time to get comfortable with what Web3 was, what it meant, and what was actually happening. Because there's so many, I think, assumptions about what the space is. There's a lot of confusion around what it actually means to be in this space. And so what I'm hoping today that each of you are going to take away from this is, one, more curiosity to learn more about it, to consider building in it, and let's kind of really explore what's happening and what the potential of this is. So I want to ask each of you, what does Web3 mean to each of you? And
I find Web3 to just be a continuation or next iteration of the internet in many ways. We talk about Web2 with these centralized companies with Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, who have honestly taken what was early on with the internet, decentralized protocols like an SMTP. SMTP isn't owned by anybody, and it's just a skin that you build on top of to make Gmail or Outlook or whatever it is. And so that has been monopolized in many ways by a handful of companies who own our data and then charge us for that data and then charge us for everything else and then get security breaches and screw us in other ways. And so for me, Web3 is just a reimagining where the people can take back ownership of tomorrow's internet, like in the simplest terms.
Okay.
Well, I think he said most of it. It's about the user, the end user, having the control of the data. And I think that's so important today because everything is centralized when it comes to anything like Facebook, like all the exchanges, crypto exchanges and so on. Like last week when Genesis had a breach, or it came out that they had a breach of 5.6 million emails being stolen. So for an end consumer to say, hey, listen, when you want my information and you want to monetize it, you're going to give me a share of it, and I will let you know when that can happen. And I think that's where Web3 is going to evolve to, and we're going to see a lot of changes coming years.
Awesome. So I think one of the essential things about Web3 is much bigger than Web3, and it's where we are today. A lot of people don't realize that there are more mobile phones than humans on Earth, and specifically there are more smartphones than humans on Earth. 8 billion people, more than 8 billion smartphones out there. What this fundamentally changes, and people again are slow to pick up until something has changed, is every human has access to a computer, and almost every human has access to the internet, almost. So within a few years, I think, again, 90% of grown-ups are going to have access to the internet with a little computer in their hand. What this also means is they can participate in the international economy. So a lot of people talk about Web3 in terms of, again, let's refer to money, because people, when they hear that, their ears perk up, and I can see by the audience that everybody likes it. Money today is only with half of grown-ups in bank accounts. So only half grown-ups in the world can have a bank account, because it's not worth giving a bank account to somebody who only has $5 a year, right? Web3 allows for every single human who has a smartphone connected to the internet to have, let's call it dollar value, to have value and to send it to the rest of the world. So we're expecting 2 billion people extra to join. So it's not about replacing banks, it's about adding the rest of humans who can have an account to be able to get an account. You as a business, anybody as a business, can sell anything they want to somebody who has a mobile phone globally. This hasn't existed in our lifetime, and I expect it within the next 5 to 10 years. So on a very simple level, it's everybody can be connected and everybody can take part. That's what Web3 means to me.
Absolutely. And so before we even go to the next part, Jamil, I'd love to understand from you. What does centralized and decentralized means? We hear this term a lot, but I think let's break that down. What does it mean? Why is it important to understand?
Okay, so we all understand why, I hope nobody is here from Facebook, so I'll say why Facebook, Google, Amazon, bad. Everybody knows what's bad about them, which is they have all our data. Anything you're doing right now, and now TikTok has screamed onto the scene with, they have access to everything in your life. If you have TikTok on your phone, they hear your conversations, they record everything you're doing. It's a fact. A lot of people don't care, and I don't care, because I think that information exists anyway. That's centralization. They have your data, and they tell an advertiser, so somebody who sells shoes will know that you're looking for shoes, and that's the ad that you get. Centralized data. Decentralization is a very difficult concept for us to understand, which is you can actually communicate using Web3, you can send messages, but there is no need for a central server or a central company to actually hold the data. The data can travel in a new way and a decentralized way, especially if that data, again, I'll use the word money, I could send that guy over there value, so $1, and nobody in the world knows who we are. All they can tell is that $1 went from this account to that account. So I'm giving you a real idea. So decentralization You don't need to understand it, just like you don't understand the internet. But what it can do is not give Facebook, Amazon, TikTok all of your data. You need to give them some, but not all. It allows for this to happen.
To make it a little bit simpler, all of you here has a mobile phone. Say I am Amazon. Instead of me giving you all the data, now all of you are my servers, but you control your server, you control your data. Decentralization on your terms, not on my terms. So I think that explains a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think I could add too much. To me, it's when you use old databases with servers, it's like the people at Amazon, TikTok, Facebook get to control it. Whereas with decentralization, anyone can set up a node and we all control the server. And so it's why it has all of the benefits that both of you already spoke to.
And one of the really cool things about this decentralized way of doing things, right, and why it's important is transparency. A lot of times with traditional companies, you don't really understand what's going on from a finance perspective, right? We see headlines and there's a lot happening. We're not going to touch on that today. But one of the coolest things to me that was like game-changing was the concept of a DAO, a decentralized organization. And what that means is, I mean, if you actually want to explain what it is, and then we can go into why it's incredible.
I've honestly just found DAOs to be internet native LLCs, basically. I think that's the easiest definition I've found, where, you know, if I wanted to start a company and then employ someone who lives here, incorporate in New York, set up a bank account, figure out how payments would work to here, deal with wire transfers, which are a headache and they're expensive. So to me, the easiest way to explain a DAO is being able to bring a bunch of people together from all over the world in a frictionless way to set up working towards whatever common purpose that they may have. And so it could be a finance company, it could be, you know, anything. But to me, it's just like a more internet native way to start a company and be able to do business.
And one of the coolest things about it, right, where you can quite literally see where money is being deployed to whom. Everybody votes on it. It's all on the blockchain. And so what that means is if you are part of such a company, you know exactly what's happening from a financial perspective. That level of transparency is not I've ever experienced anywhere. And I thought that was a very cool thing. Now, Azim, I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on public goods. And Gitcoin has done a lot of work and deployed a lot of grants. But what are public goods? And if we're not in this Web3 space, can we still benefit from public goods?
Yeah, I mean, so the traditional definition of public goods includes something being non-rivalrous and non-excludable. So think about like a public park, access to clean air and clean water, right? Like you're not excluded from it and it's not competing with anything in that way. For us in Web3 and how, especially at Gitcoin, we see it is that financial transactions are a public good, search engines are a public good, social media is a public good, and so these are all things that should be owned by the people in many ways, as opposed to a handful of companies that are centralized that have our data and be able to make money on us using things that the people should own, especially as the internet in many ways has become like a necessity. Not in many ways, it is a necessity at this point to be able to operate. And so the things that we're doing on the internet should also similarly be ones where we own those things.
And in terms of, I think, again, use cases in Web3, you know, where you see potential, you know, Ola, what do you think is going to be the next phase of this? Where do we go from here?
For me, they are more into the financial transaction part of it. For me, I see more where you can see transparency in Web3 utilized in city governments, for an example, in understanding the voice of the people in your city. So for an example, a very simple example would be, say, every year the city have a festival. And that festival, what should be the theme of the festival? Why should a few people in the city government decide what that festival should be about? It should be voted by the people that live and pay the taxes in that city. So a DAO would work wonderful because it's transparent and it's each voice of each person that live in that city that takes the decision together and make that thing. And that's why I see a lot of DAO functionality with Web3 in city government, structure, organization, universities, student bodies, etc. It's a way that should be adapted more because it's a nice way to utilize Web3.
I love that. Understanding sentiments in the region and understanding of your people, really, right? Which is fascinating. I don't think we've seen that yet, but that would be amazing. So I hope there's folks here who can make it happen, but that would be incredible. Jamil, Azim, what about you guys?
So I was saying, like any new technology, the same way internet began with email, just sending a message, and the internet today is on all your phones and every app you use. You couldn't have guessed that 20 years ago. I think one of the easiest things that happened in the past 7 years is everybody hears the words NFT, right? Non-fungible token. But let me make it much easier, not using that word. If somebody is a musician, so there's a person doing music, today they have to post their music onto maybe Spotify or a centralized app, and that app takes 30 or 50%, whatever it is, maybe 10%. If you have enough of a community around you, so let's say you're a musician and you have 1 million followers on YouTube, you can actually launch a song and make almost 100% of the one. So you have 1 million followers and you want them to buy each song for $1. Online, you can actually launch the song as a file and say, can you pay me $1? And you'll get that $1 minus a fee of maybe, let's say 1%. So you've just made $1 million minus 1% versus $1 million minus 30%. Now you can apply that to your business. There are elements of regulation. You can't just launch tokens and make money. It's being done, but that will kind of shrink the ability to do that. So there are governments there are laws that protect people. But the ability to launch something from you to anybody who wants to give you, and it doesn't have to be financial. I only say financial because people's ears perk up when you say $1. But it can be the vote, as he said. Hey, I have 1 million followers. Should I shoot my next video in Thailand or should I shoot it in New York? Vote, and this person will know that each vote is real versus, let's say, Spotify or YouTube going through them. It comes directly between you and every single fan. That's the reality.
You know what I love about this is, I think for any of you who've run a business or have tried to grow a social media account, the changing algorithms, the fact that you constantly have to be up to date with like 10 different platforms, and you constantly need to know what's the best thing to stay updated and constantly getting attention and fighting for it, right? That is such a challenge. But again, when you own your audience and where you're able to really connect with them on that level through Web3 and again, different ways of doing it, it's just such a better solution. And I think we're not there yet, but in the future, this is, I feel like it is the next phase of it, right? Where let's stop with these challenges and really figure out what we want as users, and especially as creators, it's just different. Azim, what do you feel like the potential of the space is?
Honestly, I think it's still not yet understood. I think that we're going to end up reimagining almost every industry. Using the music example, for instance, I think we've done a really good job at distribution of digital assets since the days of like Napster, right? Is that prior to this, when you wanted to launch an album, the only way to do it was through a handful of record labels. You would go to those record labels, they had to accept you, then you would get access to be able to make the music and then distribute the music through them. Now we have software where you sit at home and you make the music, and you can go on SoundCloud to be able to put your music out, or you can go to a distribution company to do it, but you do these like 80-20 splits with the distribution companies, or the really bad deals with the labels. We have social media companies for being able to further distribute things. And I think the next phase of this is being able to own the digital asset and then being able to financialize it in a different way. So, speaking to TikTok, you could have 100 million TikTok followers, but that doesn't allow you to actually financialize it very well. Like the money that you'd get from being a huge creator on TikTok or anything really comes from being able to understand how to do brand deals or being able to partner with companies. For me, and music is just a really small example of it, is that we're going to be able to use this technology to empower people to be more entrepreneurial in many ways. And so if you want to be a music creator, you make the music, you distribute the music, you end up being paid, you're able to figure out where different royalties should go, and later it's going to be that there's going to be automatic royalty distributions to the other people on the song. And this ends up going to whether it's gaming that we're talking about, finance that we're talking about, education. So to me, the interesting aspect is being able to take that NFT concept, let's say, of how digital assets work in ownership in like a decentralized way where we actually truly own them, and then being able to see what new things can be built on top of that across verticals.
Incredible. And in terms of use cases and things like that that are currently being done, right? There's a lot of misconception around, like you said, investment and building, two very separate things. I'd love to hear from each of you what projects that are currently going on that people can learn more about and really learn more about this ecosystem. You know, like how can we, one, tap into it, and two, learn more about it?
I'm going to be really biased and use the company that I work for, which is Gitcoin. We've been out for 5 years, and for the last 4 years, we've been distributing capital to open source software developers. We've given out $72 million. Countless billions of dollars in impact has been created based on companies who are grantees and went on to start some of those valuable companies in the ecosystem. And so being able to be in a position where you empower the builders to be able to actually build the things of tomorrow has countless impact itself. And so to me, I'm going to shill where I work and say Gitcoin is absolutely something that everyone should take a look at, and then try to understand for the things that matter to them, whether it's music or gaming or whatever it is, how something like that notion could be applied to the things that they care about.
Ola?
Well, I think 101 blockchain is a very nice link to see where we're going, but I think a very interesting stat is Web3 metaverse. In 2026, 25% of the world population will spend at least 1 hour every day actively immersing in either socializing, e-commerce, or education. So, and 1/3 of all businesses will be ready with services and products in the metaverse space. So there will be a lot of focus coming years in this space. And to be, if you're in the university, to be in this space is the right time to be in this space, because you actually has a voice where this is going to lead and where it's going to go.
Follow-up question on that. We all keep hearing about the metaverse. What are some examples that we can go to after this session where we can learn more about the metaverse and, you know, just to be able to use it or build in it or learn how to do both?
Myself, I will actually give you a few links afterwards so anybody can go, and I think it's the easiest way to remember any web domains.
Perfect. So if y'all can check out LinkedIn, and we'll post, we'll have a post up with different links. Please check that out, and y'all can learn more about it after. Jamil?
Okay, I'll just give two simple answers, because you touched upon two things. I'll use education as a real example. So the question being, what can people here actually, how can they take part in this, or how can they benefit? At the end of the day, you want to benefit from this new technology. There's something called learn to earn. So imagine you're a company and you pay YouTube or you pay Amazon, and they take 60% of that money and try and find you users. If you're a company and you already have a community, you can pay people $1 to actually learn what you're trying to do for them. So imagine people are incentivized to learn what you do. Somebody would, and whatever it may cost to you, maybe your cost per customer to get a customer in advertising is $1 or $5. Well, if it's $5, why don't you give that directly to the person who's interested, and you get their email and phone number? Like, that person has just watched a 5-minute video about what you do, and you gave them $5 as a thank you. So that's a very direct, real economy. And I'd say in terms of benefit, the consumer or the business person is benefiting, but so is the company. I can talk to my people. And in terms of you finding out more about this, you can go to, there are great, you said 101 blockchain. You have to be just curious. Go on to Google and say, best way to learn about crypto, and see what happens there. I have a Twitter, and I'd love maybe you guys, I'll share on, it's Jamilist, so at Jamilist. I'll make sure that I'll go on Twitter and I'll put a few of my favorite places. There's a guy called Jameson Lopp with a double P. He has an incredible website for learning.
A couple suggestions I have. So if you want to learn how to build in the ecosystem, BuildSpace is an incredible example. You learn how to do it by building in it, and one of the best programs I've tested out. If you want to learn from a more structured perspective, if you're a woman in this space and we need more women, there's women in Web3, there's also SheFi, two really great programs. And then BuildSpace has a bunch of those that are actually in AI and ML as well. So whatever, like in the ecosystem, you're interested in, you can check that out. And the Ethereum Foundation has spent years building out this ecosystem, and so has the Solana Foundation. But both of these give out grants as well. But there's a lot of incredible learning resources. So start somewhere. And finally, Discord and Twitter. There are so many amazing communities, and that's where the real learning happens when you look at the conversations that are happening. So literally being active on Twitter, you spend a couple months, and I'd say spend at least 1 hour every day if you really want to be in this space and see what people are talking about. It can be super overwhelming at first, but I think you start one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, and even people who've got technical backgrounds are still learning. This is a very fast-paced industry, but that doesn't mean you can't do it, right? There are so many incredible examples, so thank you so much, guys. For sharing your thoughts. Any final words? 30 seconds.
Final words. Honestly, not really. It's actually, thank you so much for attending. There's so many people standing here, especially compared to when it started. I'm really grateful that all of you were happy to listen to what we had to say.
I think education and cooperation will come together in the way that corporates can actually go into universities, sponsor to learn more technically about in the real life applications that the students will have, but also they will be an advantage because today in the space when I'm looking for people, there is no people in the sense of understanding the technology and be able. So I think as a student today, you are in an amazing space if you go in this direction with Metaverse and Web3, because there is a lack of knowledge, there is a lack of intelligence in this space to be able to develop further. And the students are going to be the champions moving forward the next year in any industry, in any company, in any category here in UAE or anywhere else.
Okay, final words. A student can be any age. You can start learning at any age. So that's one definition I'm going to say. We're very early. Nobody knows about this space. Anybody who says they're an expert have been in it for 3 years, maybe 5. So it's very early. Get in now because it's going to be affecting you, number one. But lastly, what I love about this space, and reach out to any of us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, because it's a very welcoming space. And I'll use Bitcoin, which created the rise in this space as an example. Every new person who buys a bit of Bitcoin, they get a bit of value, but so does everybody who's already bought before them. This is the same thing. Every new user, you're benefiting, but so is the person you're actually talking to, versus centralized approaches of you're giving your data to Facebook or Amazon and they're benefiting much more. There's a kind of equilibrium here.
Finally, and just to close us off, right? This is a space where it doesn't matter where you're from, where you grew up, what your age is. You can even be completely anonymous and still make a name for yourself in this space, which I love because traditional structures take so long and there's so many biases. But this is a space where it doesn't matter. If you're good at what you do and you can get in on it, and this is still very early on, you can still do so much. So thank you so much for giving us your time and being so attentive and so engaging. And yeah, thanks so much, everybody.